Okay guys, so this is part 2 in response to this page, so-called True Torah Jews, and their claim that the Torah states that Jews can't have a state. And really, these anti-Zionist Jews, who are an extremely small minority of Jews, one, they do the same thing that anti-Semites, Jew haters, do by creating their own definition of the term Zionism. For most people, the standard usage of the term Zionism doesn't mean a specific type of Zionism, but Zionism simply refers to the conviction that the Jewish people, like any other people on earth, have a right to self-determination, and in conjunction with that, the Jewish people have a right to govern themselves in their historical homeland. Now, this view does not state how they shall govern themselves. It doesn't state whether they should have a democracy, a republic, that the government should be based on socialist or communist principles. It doesn't state that they should kill all non-Jews there, and it doesn't say that they should not kill all non-Jews there. The idea that Jews should be able to live in their own homeland is a broad term, so you have various different opinions regarding Zionism. And even these so-called anti-Zionist Jews believe that Jews should have the ability to live in the land of Israel, and many of them actually do. Their point is merely that Jews should not be self-governing, and that Jews should not immigrate to the land of Israel in mass, at least not before the Messiah comes. Of course, their belief that the Messiah will come includes their belief that then the majority of the people of Israel will live in the land of Israel, as well as the fact that these anti-Zionist Jews believe, they do not deny, that the land of Israel is the historical home of the Jewish people. So let's just get that out of the way. Precedent: other moments in history when Jews attempted to end exile in an unauthorized way. The tribe of Ephraim. The Midrash Rabbah, that's a Midrash, on Exodus, states that part of the tribe of Ephraim left Egypt 30 years before the Exodus and met a bitter end. 300,000 of them were killed by the Philistines. The Midrash Rabbah on Song of Songs 2:7 says that these descendants of Ephraim transgressed the oath. Okay, well, you don't have to be a giant scholar to know that the Torah was not given to the people of Israel before the Exodus. So it should be quite clear to anyone who has rudimentary knowledge of the Jewish faith, of the Bible, that the tribe of Ephraim did not violate the Torah because the Torah was not yet given. Additionally, there is no evidence that they were ever given such an oath. And as we saw before, this supposed oath is based on passages in the Torah. So I am sorry, but this is a contradiction in the argument. I don't care that this is a Jewish text, because as anyone who looks at the historical and traditional approaches of Midrash and Agartha in the Jewish faith, they will know that these two types of Jewish literature are not halachically binding, and they were full of metaphorical teachings and concepts. And sometimes there are different opinions of individual rabbis that are preserved, and you don't necessarily have to agree with it. I know that's a highly unpopular, if not blasphemous, claim in the quote-unquote ultra-Orthodox community, but it's true. I encourage you, research the approach at understanding Midrash and Agartha. in traditional Judaism. By traditional, I mean ancient traditional Judaism, in the explanations of the Gaonim and the early Rishonim, the early post-Talmudic rabbis. And you'll see that that was their approach, that you don't base Jewish teaching, Jewish legal teaching and practice on Midrash and Agadata. And again, the obvious problem here, that this was before the Exodus, and there's no historical account in the Bible of such an event. Okay, the invaders. In Numbers 14:44 relates, it's related that a group of Jews undertook an unauthorized invasion in the Holy Land after the sin of the spies. Moses warned them, "Why do you transgress the command of God? It will not succeed." The end was that the Amalekites and the Canaanites who dwelt in that hill country came out and smote them and smashed them to utter destruction. The Targum Yonatan in Song of Songs 2:7 says that these invaders transgressed the oath. Okay, this one's a little bit better than the last one, because at least here, this is after the Exodus. However, the problem here is that the Bible explicitly states that Moses stated that they should not go ahead and enter into the land. They were warned by a known prophet of God. And the text explicitly states that they transgressed and that they will not succeed. However, to take this out of context and to attempt to apply it to all other situations is extremely presumptuous and needs to be backed up by other textual evidence, which is simply lacking here. To the contrary, numerous verses can be given to back up the other view, such as the Jewish people returning from exile and working on the restoration of Jerusalem in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. Alright, so let's continue. Bar Kokhba. In the year 130 CE, Simon Bar Kokhba led a Jewish revolt against Rome and established a Jewish kingdom. This is another one of the cases listed by the Midrash when the oaths were transgressed. The Talmud, Sanhedrin 93b, says that when the sages of the time realized that Bar Kokhba was not the Messiah, they killed him, putting a stop to his revolt. Alright, well, I need a reference to see, first of all, what the Midrash actually says about this particular case. And as for the Talmud statement that the sages of the time realized that he was not the Messiah and they killed him, I also need to see what that says. I don't have time to look it up at the moment. However, I do know, and as implied here, they did not oppose it originally, even before they knew with certainty that he was the Messiah. So you need to ask yourself, why did they support him even before they were certain that he was the Messiah? And why did they not wait for a Messiah to magically appear and magically cause these things to happen? That's essentially what these anti-Zionist religious Jews are waiting for. A sort of Christian type apocalyptic Messiah that will come and by miracles restore the people of Israel to the land, almost as if to sweep the Jewish people out of their exile and bring them back to the land of Israel on clouds. However, the Talmudic sages originally supporting Bar Kokhba, in doing so, clearly exhibited that they had a very realistic approach, a very realistic understanding of the restoration of the people of Israel. And that is by normal human means, not by miraculous miracles. Famous Jewish commentators and legal authorities. Rashi. The prayer, God of salvations, and the four oaths is a reference to the oaths of the Song of Songs. We ask God, save us, for you have made us swear not to rebel against the nations. And we are keeping your oath in exile and bearing the yoke of exile. That doesn't tell us much. Again, as we stated in the last video, oaths have conditions on both sides. And as we stated in the last video, the teaching regarding the oath includes that the nations will not break their side of the oath, as well as the fact that the League of Nations, as well as the dominant, controlling empire, which had control over the land of Israel at that time, called for and allowed the people of Israel to return to their Holy Land and establish a state. So no, again, this doesn't apply. Also keep in mind that Song of Songs was one of the songs that was debated as to whether or not it should be included in the Bible, in the Talmud itself. Alright, continuing on. Maimonides, also known as Rambam, Moshe ben Maimon. The Messiah will gather in the Jews from exile. Whoever does not believe in him is denying the Torah, which states, the Lord will restore your exiles and have mercy on you. Alright, this is kind of funny because this actually goes against the idea that the Jewish people should not be restored. And if you're thinking that because it says the Lord your God will restore you, that it means that the people of Israel are going to be somehow miraculously restored by being mechanically uprooted from the exile and mechanically floating over the seas and back into the land, you have a very unhistorical view of Jewish literature and the Jewish faith. Let's continue reading. When King Solomon, peace be upon him, made known with his holy inspiration that this nation, when it is sunk in exile, will try to arouse itself not at its proper time, and they will die because of this, and travails will come upon them. He warned against this and made an oath against this in an allegorical way and said, I adjure you, daughters of Zion, Alright, this is a famous letter of Yemen. Again, this is an agadata, and you have to understand it in the context of the laws of kings and the laws of dwelling in the land of Israel, which you can find written by this same guy Maimonides in the last book of the Mishneh Torah. It's called Laws of Kings and Their Wars. You will not find any sort of condition for a miraculous Messiah to come before Jews can return to the Holy Land. It's simply not there. In fact, the Rambam also writes in multiple places that it is an erroneous view to think that nature will change when the Messiah comes. That it is erroneous to believe that the Messiah will be some sort of apocalyptic Superman. So it's kind of pathetic that they take these teachings out of context. Now here's another one. Rabbi Ishaya ben Eliyahu Ditrani, living in the Holy Land is a meritorious act. Nevertheless, the Jewish people must not all go up together with a strong hand. And an act similar to the ingathering of the exiles, for they are not permitted to hasten the end until the Creator hastens our redemption. Could it be that the Creator is going to hasten our redemption in a way that even the nations call for us to recreate our own state? Sort of like what happened in the early 20th century? Just exactly what are you expecting for God to do to let you know that now is the right time? That's what I'd like to know. Rabbi Bachya ben Asher, we must follow in the footsteps of the patriarchs and prepare ourselves to approach the Gentiles with gifts, with soft speech, and with prayer before God. But war is impossible, for God made the Jewish people swear not to wage wars against the nations. Yeah, proactive wars, offensive wars. But if you think that it's against God's will, that when the nations are butchering your people, you're supposed to passively lay down and allow them to slit your throat, I encourage you, by all means, go ahead and do so. And don't complain when another Holocaust happens. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Shesas. There is no doubt that traveling to the Holy Land is a meritorious act, but now, one of the three oaths God made the Jewish people swear is not to go up as a wall. All right, we've already talked about this. Okay. Shlomo ben Shimon Duran. By the way, several of these are not really the most famous rabbis. Many of them are not widely known. During exile, living in the Holy Land, During exile, living in the Holy Land is not a general commandment for all Jews, but on the contrary, it is forbidden, as the Talmud says in the last chapter of Ketubot, that this is one of the oaths that God made the Jews swear, that they not hurry the end and not go up as a wall. And go and see what happened to the children of Ephraim when they hurried the end. As we said before, the Midrash regarding Ephraim states that this happened even before the Torah was given. Also before there was a command to live in the land of Israel. And there is such a command in the Torah that we should do the commands in the land of Israel. Of course, we should not proactively instigate wars needlessly without any threat to our lives. But wars of defense are necessary when the nations break their end of the covenant, as clearly occurred both during the Holocaust and really throughout the exile. Abraham Isaac Abarbanel. Abraham feared that his descendants would rise up to leave the exile before the time set by God. We must bear the yoke of the exile and live under the nations until the time of the end. Okay, that doesn't tell us much. How do you know when the time of the end has come? And again, Abraham is before the giving of the Torah. Let's see how much we have. Okay, we're almost to the end. The Maharal of Prague. God made the Jewish people swear by the heavens and the earth not to leave exile before the time. For just as the heavens and the earth keep to the order of nature decreed by God, never changing, in the same way the Jewish people must keep the order of exile decreed by God. And just as the heavens and earth, if they were to change their nature and order, would bring havoc and destruction to the world, so too, if the Jewish people leaves the exile decreed on them by God, it would mean destruction for them, God forbid. Therefore, they must not violate the decree. As though the Holocaust did not happen before the establishment of the State of Israel, as though there were not numerous Holocausts throughout the Jewish world long before the German Holocaust of the 20th century. Rather, as stated before, all of these quotes, if you have a logical mind, are in reference to offensive wars, unnecessary wars. Rabbi Chaim ben Attar. The verse, I will scatter you among the nations, refers to the first oath, which mandates that the Jews remain scattered and not immigrate as a wall with a strong hand to resettle the Holy Land. Alright. Originally, when Jews began coming back to the Holy Land in the first Aliyah, they were not coming with a strong hand. There was no Palestinian state. Throughout history, Jews did not try to coerce their independence in the land of Israel. When they were allowed to live here, they did so. What happened is that as Arab leadership in the area saw that Jews were increasing in number, and they also saw that the nations as a whole, the nations that had a say in the world, were allowing and even calling for the restoration of the people of Israel to an independent state, the Arabs here, whose land it was not, it was under the Ottoman Empire, which was Turkish, and not legally obtained. The Arabs made war with the Jewish people. They made war. They instigated an offensive war. The Jewish people fought back to save their lives. Did you, O anti-Zionist Jew, want that they would roll back on their backs and allow the Arabs to slaughter them, as had just been done in the Holocaust. Or, as took place even in some anti-Zionist communities in Jerusalem, when Arabs came to attack, they pulled out guns and fought back. Yes, that happened in Mea She'arim in the 20th century. Anti-Zionist Jews resorting to violence to live in the land of Israel. But they resorted to violence in self-defense. Rabbi Yonasan Eibschutz. The Jewish people cries out to the nations, do not awaken an early ingathering of Israel. Even if all the Jews are ready to go up to Jerusalem and all the nations agree, still, God forbid that I should go there. Okay, this is the first quote that I really think is quite ridiculous. And I have such a prerogative. No one in the Jewish world, not even in the ultra-Orthodox world, agrees with every opinion of every rabbi. And if they say that they do, they're fooling themselves, but they're not fooling you. Hopefully not. This is ridiculous. I would love to see a logical explanation to this. All the other quotes I have seen, I think that the compilers of these quotes are ignoring other more reasonable interpretations. But this one is quite... It could even be that anti-Zionism among religious Jews stems from this particular individual. I don't know for sure, but I have a sneaking suspicion, and look how recent he is. It's not really that long ago in the grand scheme of things. I'd like to look him up, but I haven't done so yet. I suspect something. Alright, Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. When the uprising led by Bar Kokhba proved a disastrous error, it became essential that the Jewish people be reminded for all times of an important fact, namely, that they must never again attempt to restore their national independence by their own power. They were to entrust their future as a nation solely to divine providence. When the uprising led by Bar Kokhba proved a disastrous error. Meaning that, according to Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, all of this agadic interpretation about the oaths is a retroactive interpretation in order to remind the Jewish people not to rise up and bring about an offensive war in order to create independence in reaction to the Bar Kokhba disaster. And as he seems to be alluding here in this quote, Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch appears to insinuate that before this happened, this wasn't the approach. Meaning that the whole idea of the three oaths is only retroactively valid in the minds of those who hold to it. Additionally, as stated again and again in this video and the previous video, to ignore that there was no push, no violent push to get the nations to agree to the establishment of a Jewish state is simply to be intellectually dishonest. If there is such a thing as divine providence, then we saw it when Britain and the Balfour Declaration essentially promised the entirety of British Mandate of Palestine to the Jewish people, which included all of the current state of Israel as well as Jordan. But then the League of Nations had a brilliant idea to create an Arab state in the British Mandate of Palestine. Sounds familiar, right? Well, they did so, and they named it Jordan. But that wasn't good enough. They wanted a second Arab state in the former British Mandate of Palestine. British Mandate of Palestine. And when Israel agreed to it, to the establishment of a second Arab state in the former British Mandate of Palestine, even when Israel agreed to it, with the agreement of all the nations, those nations whose voices counted, the Arabs in the area who did not have their own state, they themselves also were granted states. They were not autonomous powers. But then they rose up and created an offensive war to destroy the Jewish people and openly proclaimed their desire to throw Jews into the sea. The Jews fought back. They shed their blood to save their lives, defensively, and regained, despite all odds, their homeland. If you don't call this divine providence, then I don't know what is. Shalom uvracha.